Everyone who wants to sell their business wants to know how much their business is worth and how businesses are valued. A surprising number of business owners who have worked in their businesses and owned them for many years, even decades, don't know how businesses are valued, let alone how much their business is worth, and how to optimize the overall outcome in their sale. In this video, we're going to explain the valuation principles for $1 million plus businesses and show examples of how it works in practice. The first question most business owners ask when they're looking to sell their business is, how much is my business worth? And that's followed closely by, how can I make it worth more? If you ask these questions early enough, it makes it possible to make simple changes that could dramatically increase the value of their business. Whether business owners want to sell now or in the future, to maximize the value of their business, it is critical that they understand how businesses are valued, so they can focus on the right areas, implement the right changes to create the best possible result when the time comes. Valuation calculations can be very complex, and there are a number of ways to calculate a business valuation, but the fundamentals affecting the valuation remain the same. In this video, we'll run through the basics you need to know to understand how to value $1 million plus businesses and where to focus your attention to maximize the business value. Now, before we start, we need to distinguish between the two main types of private businesses by size. There are those worth more than $1 million and those worth less than $1 million. Fully 95% of all businesses in most markets have fewer than 10 employees, they're owner-operated, and they're generally worth less than $1 million. Almost all of these small businesses have working owners and are worth less than $1 million and therefore are being bought by private buyers who want to work in it. So it's the buyer job market. This affects how they're valued. For example, in Australia and New Zealand, about 2.4 million out of 2.5 million businesses are in this buyer job category. We've covered how to value those small businesses in a separate video. In this video, we're only talking about $1 million plus businesses, say worth between 1 and, say, pick a number, 100 million or more. It's a surprisingly low 5% of all businesses. We'll call them medium and large businesses. Now, the motivation of buyers in this market is very different to those buying a small business where they're buying a job. The investors in these businesses are usually strategic buyers who are buying the business because of its strategic value to them. These medium and large businesses are usually valued on a capitalization of earnings basis. Now that sounds technical, but it's a pretty much straightforward return on investment basis. Investors are buying businesses for their income streams, for the cash returns of the business. Now, they're not the only type of buyers, and generally speaking, strategic buyers will buy a business for other reasons, but they'll still look at the cash flow to work out how much it's worth and how much they should expect to pay for it. So in a separate video, we're talking about the different categories of buyers, but in this video, we'll just put them all in the one bucket and call them buyers for these businesses that are worth more than $1 million. Now, when you are valuing a business like this, you apply the same principles as you would for any other type of investment, e.g. a property investment, but it's only more complex because there are more variables, more moving parts. So with a property, for example, just as investors expect a return on investment, so do buyers of businesses expect a return on investment based on their future maintainable earnings. Now, future maintainable earnings are the expected ongoing returns. $1 million plus businesses are generally valued on a multiple of EBIT or EBITDA. EBIT and EBITDA have been covered in another video, but briefly, EBIT is earnings before interest and tax, after paying all wages for all working owners, after market rents on properties, etc. EBITDA is sometimes used where the DA on the end of EBIT represents depreciation and amortization. The EBIT multiple is related to the risk versus the return. And the enterprise value, EV, is ultimately the total investment required to earn the profit or the EBIT. So you have an EBIT and an EBIT multiple. Now the EBIT multiple is the reciprocal of the capitalised earnings. So if an investor requires a rate of return of say 25%, then the EBIT multiple is 1 divided by 0.25, which is 4. The enterprise value of a business, or EV, is according to its cash flow or its profit. So call that X times Y, where Y is the multiple, and X times Y equals the enterprise value. Effectively, what we're saying is that the business is making a profit of say $500,000 and the owner requires a 25% return on their money, or the investor does, then they can afford to invest $2 million overall. That's all the assets required to generate the profit are included in that $2 million. So if someone invests $2 million of money in the various assets required to acquire and run the business, not just acquire it, but also operate it, then they would get a 25% return if the EBIT was $500,000. And that's pre-tax and pre-interest. The enterprise value includes all things, as we said, required to generate the profit. That would typically be including plant and equipment, inventory and work in progress, trade debtors, less trade creditors, and also less employee entitlements. Now, any surplus, if there is one, is goodwill. So goodwill is simply the surplus of the value of the cash flow of the business, being the enterprise value, over the value of the tangible assets, or the net tangible assets. So the difference between the two, the value of the cash flow versus the value of the tangible assets that are involved in the business or required by the business, is goodwill. We've talked about working capital in another video and why trade debtors and creditors are involved with the calculation regardless of whether they're going to be acquired by the new owner or not. So for example, even if the transaction is an asset sale and the new owner is not going to buy the debtors in the business, then they will still have to allow an equivalent amount to build their own debtors book after the sale. So the overall investment is going to include debtors amounts as though they were being acquired. So the simple principle is enterprise value is all money you have to invest to buy and run the business, i.e. the money in. And EBIT is the money out. As soon as you value a business on an EBIT basis or a multiple of earnings, you have to take into account the total investment, not just the investment in selected assets that you're acquiring from the business owner. It's all investment in the business or required not just to buy it, but to operate it. That's the total money in, money out concept. We've created a simple model to show you how businesses are valued. In our example, we'll start off with, and the top figure is a slider for the EBIT. So let's start off with an EBIT of $1 million, keep it simple. And we'll select an EBIT multiple of 4, so the maths is simple. So here we are talking about the normalised EBIT of $1 million, the EBIT multiple of 4, and you can see the cap rate of 25. So if I increase the EBIT multiple to 5, the cap rate is 20% return on investment. And drop it down the other way to 3, it's 33%. You can see how the maths works. Let's just leave this business at $1 million of EBIT and a multiple of 4, or a rate of return of 25%. Enterprise value is $4 million. Okay, so now the enterprise value of $4 million is the money in, and here it is down here. Now the composition of that, as we've said, is all assets required to generate the profit. Now in some businesses there will be no stock, so let's bring the stock to 0. The business is still worth $4 million, and what changed was the goodwill factor. You bring stock up. If the business requires $2 million worth of stock, then the goodwill component of the enterprise value is lowered by the same amount. Now, the $4 million that we've said it's worth on a cash flow basis is made up of $1 million of inventory, $2 million of debtors, minus $1 million of creditors and employee entitlements. So the net working capital is $2 million. The plant and equipment was $2 million, and that's total net tangible assets of 4 million, there is no goodwill. If there was $1.5 million of stock, there's actually negative goodwill. So the business is worth more in pieces, in theory, than it is according to the cash flow that it's generated. Let's bring those back down to something more reasonable. $1 million there, say no plant and equipment, and that's the case with many businesses. So here we are with a business with making $1 million worth of profit. Let's say that same business has the same amount of assets, $2 million of goodwill, and now it only made $500,000. On an EBIT multiple of 4, it's worth $2 million. But there's no goodwill because the asset composition is the same. Let's say we get an investor who is only going to pay on a 3.5 times multiple or 28% return on investment. He would value that business at 1.7 million. It still had $1 million worth of stock, 2 million of debtors, again negative goodwill. If this business didn't carry any debtors and no stock, very unusual, and no creditors, then the total value is represented by goodwill. As soon as you introduce a component, it eats into goodwill. In this example, we have $1 million of profit, an EBIT multiple of 4, applying a cap rate of 25%, an enterprise value therefore of 4 million. We've got $1 million of inventory, 1.5 of debtors, $500,000 of creditors, net working capital is 2 million. We've put in $1 million of plant and equipment. So the total tangible asset value is 3 million out of the 4, and 1 million therefore is goodwill. Now scrolling down, how does the owner get paid? The 4 million. $2 million will be in the business sale contract if it's an asset sale, representing the business plant and equipment and goodwill. So it's that million and that million. And then there's $1 million of stock. So a contract of sale would have in it $2 million plus stock. And then outside of the contract, the buyer is going to build a debtors book of 1.5 and build a trade creditors book of $500,000. That's his other million. The vendor, the owner, is going to collect $1.5 million from his debtors, if all goes well, pay out $500,000 of creditors, and that's where he'll collect his other net million outside of the contract of sale. So he still gets his $4 million gross proceeds before tax.
For many people, that's a lot of information to take in. Just remember to focus on the basics. The value equals the revenue stream, being the profit, times a return on investment. Once you understand the methods involved in how most buyers value businesses of this size, you can make adjustments to your business, fine-tune it and optimize the outcome. If you do want a copy of the Excel spreadsheet, just click on the link and download it. All the best. Hope you found it useful. Bye.